Comprehensive planning has been around for a very long time in the US. And in the earlier era of it, you saw some real differences. A lot of text heavy documents, really thick, very much focused on policy, kind of static, very, very high level visionary stuff contained, very goal oriented. And in the current era, it's a little bit different. You talk a lot more about different topics. Technology has certainly entered the fray. They're much more graphic heavy documents, as we'll see in some of these examples, and they're more implementation and performance based. Big advantage 1970s had over us. They had really cool fonts. They had no shame in using the grooviest, hippest fonts they could find. Nowadays, it's pretty much Helvetica or Times New Roman. So we haven't advanced in every possible way, but we do okay. There's so much to be said about comprehensive planning. This is the way I can think about it best and easiest for this little talk. So you collect a lot of data. Everything's a bit of a mess at first. You're really trying to figure out what you have, what's on the ground, what's current, existing, or in the pipeline. As you move forward, begin to get public input and develop perceptions about what the issues are and how potentially some candidate solutions. You think about it more, validate those solutions, develop scenarios, what have you. And then finally, you really want to think about enlightenment. And if you're really lucky, you get supreme enlightenment. I think that Streetlight Data, in my work at least, has helped me in every single phase that is shown here, from data collection all the way through to refining options and then explaining the recommendations and why they're valid. Kudos to Streetlight for helping in every phase here. It's really been important on a couple of these projects. So first up, Pinehurst, North Carolina. This is what you're really tuning in for. But Pinehurst, unless you are in North Carolina or visited this really wonderful small town, community village, actually, you may not know much about it unless you are an avid golfer. So with that, another big issue in Pinehurst is traffic from the tourists through traffic going through the roundabout, seen in the red circle at the top. So a lot of data you can get, and comprehensive planning Streetlight is sort of a complement in many cases for the data that you can achieve or obtain from other sources. So you see in the bottom right where I've coded in some gates throughout Pinehurst to understand traffic movements better. And one thing that's really important that I do a lot when I use Streetlight Data is I don't use just the available graphics or tools online, which are great, particularly when you're interactive with people, which we did do in Pinehurst, by the way. We actually had people come up to the workstation during a charrette and work with us, and I could show them all the different things, the visualization options that Streetlight had. But in the final reporting, we wanted to make sure things like colors and format and fonts match. So understanding how to export the data and getting at it and using it in Microsoft Excel is really important. So one word there is, or two words, I guess, pivot table. So make sure you understand the pivot table function when you work with Streetlight Data. A couple of other examples on this slide. So Wendell, North Carolina, there's a small town not too far away, working with them actively now. And Leesburg, Virginia. Leesburg first on the left. Another wonderful community, a little bit larger, 45,000 people there in the DC corridor, a lot of long distance commuting. And one of the questions that they had is shown in the middle, a graphic in the dark square, and Leesburg's in the middle, and there's a bypass route that actually goes around it from the northwest, or many people are coming and headed to the southeast towards Washington, DC, or someplace in between. And they were rightfully concerned that these small roads in between in the downtown area were seeing a lot of cut through traffic, and they were about ready to start up on a larger study just focused on that issue. But we show with Streetlight that actually, if you look at the dots here, the blue dots, the origin point, and then all the red and green dots are where the traffic's going. The bypass here is actually doing a pretty job of moving traffic around. It's doing what it's supposed to be doing in terms of moving traffic through and around the main part of the historic downtown. The right-hand side, COVID is important. And we can see here that in Leesburg, at least, we saw a 43% decline in vehicular traffic for a 3-month period, year on year, 2019 to 2020. In the small town Wendell, actually it was more like 17%. Why would that be such a big difference for the same 3-month period in both years? Leesburg has a lot more tech jobs, a lot more ability to work from home, probably is the answer. So we were able to explain what the impacts were that people were seeing in Leesburg from COVID. Durham Chapel Carbar MPO, another MPO I should have thanked. Congestion management processes and documentation is an important deal for metropolitan planning organizations, especially those over 200,000. And there's usually an 8-step process. And this is a very data-driven process. And one where we want to go back and check historic data in the same way that you do the current data. And of course, if you use Streetlight, you can do that. So you're not hamstrung by doing counts now when COVID's really impacting volumes a bit still. But you can go back in time and see what historic volumes were and compare trends over time, which is really what the CMP congestion management process is all about. So in Durham, a few of the graphics that came out of that, just to continue kind of the pictures here. Minutes spent in congestion and peak and off-peak periods. Well, if you time your data right when you do your model runs in Streetlight, you can figure that out pretty easily in these corridors. And these are some really important corridors in this in metropolitan planning area. And you can see there's a lot of variation between peak and off-peak travel times. And that's kind of nice to see. So you know how to focus your resources and kinds of trips that you're trying to address in your mitigation considerations. Another way of looking at this is the corridor level and really focusing in on this. We combine the Streetlight data with crash data. And so we had both recurring and non-recurring congestion elements that we were thinking about as we developed this plan and this process. And it was very cool. And just in my mind anyway, maybe a little biased, but I thought it was a really big improvement over what had been done in previous years, which again was a very text heavy kind of document. This really this document really conveys a lot of nice things in a quick and easy to digest format. Moving a little bit to the right, the Capital Area Metropolitan Planning Organization, CAMPO, doing some work with them today. And one of the undersung things, I think, if that's actually a phrase, in Streetlight Data is freight. And one of the big things you'll find out if you do freight planning, if you've already done it, is data. It's the biggest challenge you face. And there are some nice sources. The Freight Analysis Framework, FAF version 4 and others is out there. There are some other things that are available. Usually they're very restricted to the high-level roads and things like that. But again, with Streetlight Data, you can look at changes in truck traffic, both medium and heavy duty, over time. And the percent trucks, in this case, in one small area, it's not a very small area, actually it's 430 square miles in the middle, but you can see the percent trucks and you can see which roads are carrying the most trucks in and out of that specific study area. So that was just a singular zone. I was able to upload into Streetlight and then see the truck traffic exiting there. So you know exactly where the truck traffic is focused. And then the origins of the truck traffic, you know, where it's coming from inside the study area, also Streetlight data on the right-hand side. And you can see it's really kind of restricted right now to a few locations up and down US Highway 1 or Capitol Boulevard if you're local. So this is really insightful. Very hard to get this if you weren't paying a lot of money from another source to obtain this kind of data this quickly. So really appreciated it there. So a few just highlights here that I've learned anyway is understand pivot tables in Microsoft Excel so you can really dig into that data that Streetlight's giving you. The biggest thing that I think Streetlight data usage can benefit from when you work with clients, particularly if you're a consultant like me, is defining the questions. There's so much data, so many different ways to slice it and display it. Really work hard, as Einstein said, or is attributed to saying, spend most of your time defining the question and less time defining the answer, because Streetlight will help you with the answer. Use Streetlight with data with people. It's got some really nice interactive features and share that information with people and make it more dynamic. Make your presentation more dynamic and interesting with Streetlight. Social equity questions are big, and I showed some MPO examples. They are required to look at low-income and minority populations by federal law. So they are definitely encouraged to do that in a lot of different ways. And decision-making, the Streetlight really helps there too by thinking about the trip maker, not just the trips being made. And the value proposition of Streetlight really should include freight planning, way more than it does right now, in my opinion. Freight planning is a big deal. We've definitely gotten more interested in supply chains because of COVID, and this tool can really help with that as it did in the capital area. A lot of communities are looking at COVID-19 now. They don't really trust the data they're obtaining in today's numbers, but hey, with Streetlight, you can go back in time, literally, and look at data as just as tightly and uniquely as you can today. And so it's kind of nice to have that historic attribute of Streetlight. And then comprehensive planning is really about looking at a lot of different data and mashing it up. And because Streetlight data does all these different features and access different trip makers and different trip characteristics like circuity and speed and duration, it really helps with comprehensive planning, even if it's not a transportation plan per se. But from a high level, Streetlight data has a definite home. And I know I at least encourage people to use Streetlight in their projects if they can do so.